Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Final Trade. So I've been asked, yes, what are my thoughts on the Commander debacle over the last couple of weeks, beginning with the banning of cards and then into the Rules Committee folding and control of the format going over to WotC. So, of course, the cards getting banned, my thoughts on that is most people will not care in the long run. We've had big kerfluffles like this in Magic before. You remember all those price increases in June of 2022 and how Magic is dead because of them? And here we are 2.5 years later, and Magic is doing just fine. This was going to be the same way. Yes, it was three very expensive staple cards of the format getting banned. It was going to upset a lot of people. It was going to destroy a lot of value. But ultimately, everyone would have moved on and kept playing Magic because it's a fun game that they like. So I just don't think that was that big of a deal. Now, exactly how the Rules Committee handled it, where they did not consult with the Advisory Council, what's the point of having an Advisory Council if you refuse to consult with them? So that was dumb. But then we get into where a couple of knuckle draggers on the left end of the spectrum go and send death threats because their cards are now worth a lot less money than they were before. And the advisory council decides, oh no, a complication, a bit of adversity in my life. And so they all just up and quit and give the format over to WotC. Now, if you think that the format is going to be better managed by WotC, you need to have your head examined. WotC is the absolute worst entity to control the format because WotC, as they have proven over the last couple of years, is primarily concerned not with gameplay, not with nurturing formats, not with fun, not with any of that. They're concerned with making money, and they should be. If I was the CEO of WotC, I would be concerned first and foremost with making money. Also, now, I have a personality that tends to look to the ultra long term, and so maybe I would do that by trying to lure past players back into the game to broaden the base of people spending money on Magic instead of just trying to, sell 60 fake Magic cards for $1,000 and see how much I can raise the price of every box and shrink the amount of cardboard in it. But overall, the movement of the format to WotC, yeah, that's going to be bad. Is it going to be catastrophic? No. Commander's the favorite, most played format of Magic. It'll continue to be that way unless WotC decides to change that, unless WotC decides to go back to spending the effort to cultivate and nurture Standard as the beating heart of Magic, which it should be from that ultra long-term perspective. That's where you need the most players spending money because it brings recurring revenue at a better pace than Commander does. That's a whole different topic. Now, what I think is really interesting about all of this is an examination of the Rules Committee from a standpoint of, let's call it, organizational robustness. Because, and I hate to say it this way, but Sheldon is barely cold in his grave. And the Rules Committee, when faced with their first actual incident of adversity and difficulty, they absolutely folded and they dissolved and they did the one thing Sheldon would never dream of, which is hand the format over to WotC. If Sheldon thought WotC should own the format, he would have done that before he died. He would not have spent a decade cultivating a rules committee, trying to get the correct people onto it, and working so hard in the latter days of his life to make sure that the format was shepherded in the correct hands to keep it going healthily forward into the future. And so I wonder a lot of things, and I did some internet searching and I tried to find, I searched for Commander Rules Committee Charter. Did they have a charter that basically just, in the dumbest way possible, did it lay out how are we supposed to do things? Or were these people just flying by the seat of their pants? And well, I couldn't find anything. Maybe it's a problem with me searching, maybe it's a problem with Google categorizing things to deliver the results, or maybe a charter just flat didn't exist. And, when you run an organization like that, where you have these people involved, multiple people who have to come to consensus decisions, you need rules for that. You need rules for when the committee is going to consider banning a card. What is the process? And I suspect they had none of this. I suspect that basically they just kind of met on Slack or Discord once in a while, and they just discuss things, and someone would say, hey, maybe Jeweled Lotus is, you know, accelerating the power curve too hard. Maybe it's allowing turn 2 5 mana opens to become too common, and maybe we need to pull that back. You know, maybe they just dropped that in the Discord channel one day, and then they discussed it for a while, and eventually they said, you know, shouldn't we discuss this with our advisory council, because that's why it exists? And they said, nah, let's not do that. And then they just rolled it out along with the other 3 bands they announced at the same time. And so if you had no process for this, you had no guiding principle on how to do something informed by past successes and past mistakes, then what the hell were you doing? How do you get to this point in an organization and you don't have that type of control, that type of ability to say, oh, you know, we learned hard lessons in the past, and then we put down on paper how to avoid repeating those lessons going forward? And so I've spent most of my professional career in large engineering organizations, and quite a lot, in fact, almost all of it, doing flight testing, and most of that doing manned flight testing. And of course, the history of manned flight testing is written in the blood of dead test pilots. And so everything we do in flight testing has a procedure. It has very, very good reasons for why you do something in a particular order, why you protect some system in a certain way, why a guy literally wears the launch key around his neck until he makes sure the pad crew is clear and back to the bunker building, and then hands over the launch key to the test director and they fire. And all of those things are the way they are because at some point someone died in a flight test, or died in a pad fire, or died somehow. And we took those lessons to heart and we worked them in so that no one in the future hopefully would die for that reason. And so then we always have to look for new and creative ways to kill people in flight testing. And the Rules Committee had none of this kind of, you know, ingrained knowledge from experience in their career or life. And instead, it seems like they just flew by the seat of their pants. Hey, we want to ban these cards, and this time we're not going to announce that we're putting these cards under consideration and soliciting feedback from the community and from people we personally respect and from the advisory council. And instead, they just go and do it. And so it's really interesting to see, you know, what happens when you have a group of people who has absolutely no guiding rules on how they're doing something like this. And what we saw was exactly what panned out over the last 2 weeks. They hit the very, very first snag of adversity since Sheldon left us, and they completely fold. They don't just quit, they destroy the Rules Committee. They dismantle the Rules Committee. They don't just say, hey, we were obviously the wrong people to do this job. Give us some time while we try and figure out who can come in and help us figure out who the right people to replace us are. They didn't even do that. They just said, you know what? Let's destroy everything Sheldon built. Let's destroy it all. And then we'll hand it over to WotC, the absolute worst entity to run it. It's the fox in charge of the henhouse. And so it's amazing that not only you built an organization that was so brittle, so non-robust, that it absolutely collapsed under the first bit of tension, but that the people individually, you know, you cannot be public facing on the internet today and not get some kind of threats thrown at you, threats of violence, rudeness, shit posting, all the rest of it. It doesn't matter how small you are. This channel has 2,800 subscribers, and people leave me rude and mean and occasionally threatening comments. And I'm literally nobody in the grand scheme of social media. And so you take these Rules Council people who are the forward-facing group of Commander. They are the adults in charge, and, you know, in charge I would use very loosely, but they're the forward-facing group. And as soon as some left side of the spectrum knuckle dragger on 3 sigmas from the average comes along and threatens them, they're like, oh God, we can't do this. Did you never expect that this would happen? Did you not understand that when you do anything, someone will be upset? Someone's going to get pissed off at me over this video. Someone's going to get pissed off at me when I post Friday sealed deals tomorrow. It just happens. You're on the internet, and any person 3 sigma to the left of the average on the intelligence curve, they can come on here and just be irritated all of a sudden and let it out on you through the comment section. That was always going to happen to the Commander Rules Committee. And the fact that they were so thin-skinned and unable to cope with it is amazing. How do you go through the process of trying to assemble these people to be the stewards of Commander going forward, and you choose so poorly that the entire thing collapses apart on at their decision? It was their decision. It would have been fine if they had said, hey, we don't get paid for this. We do it in addition to our real jobs. It's a lot of stress, and now these knuckle draggers are threatening us on the internet. We're going to find people to replace us, but to still try and steward the format forward. That would have been one thing. But to say, no, we're going to ruin it for everyone. We're going to fold the rules committee, dissolve it, and hand the format over to WotC. It's like, why would you go those extra 3 or 4 steps that you don't have to take? Certainly there would have been people on the advisory council, that advisory council you were supposed to be having advise you. Certainly there would have been people on there who you could have gone to and said, hey, 1 or 2 or 3 of our rules committee folks want to give up, and what do you think about replacing them? And either they might have said, yes, I will take that role, or they would have said, hey, let's have a conversation about who we could bring in from the wider community to replace those people on the rules committee. It's unbelievable. And just from the standpoint of organizational failure, how do you... It's tragic to see that Sheldon worked so hard, but ultimately he chose the wrong people. And the organization was not built with any type of rules, any type of process, any type of institutional memory of times that had done things right and times that had done things wrong, so that it could use those to guide them in the future. And the whole thing is just an unbelievable mess. I have known test pilots who died in flight tests because the organization that they worked in was not built robust enough to protect them. And after that, we do a lot of soul searching and we say, how did the organization fail and how can we try to make it more robust so in the future this doesn't happen again? And, I've seen $15 million unmanned flight tests go up completely in smoke and return 0 usable data because somebody loaded the wrong piece of hardware onto the flight vehicle. And you take those lessons and you learn from them and you put new safeguards in place. And similarly, I've seen plenty of times when we've had success and we learn lessons from success too. You're supposed to learn lessons not just from failure, but from success. And apparently no one ever involved with the rules committee or the advisory council ever said, hey, let's write a procedure. If we think a card might be problematic, here should be the procedure for how we put it on notice, how we inform the community, how we have meetings to talk about it, maybe criteria by which we judge the card. And then if we eventually move to either take it off of notice and say, we don't think it's really that problematic, here's the way we handle that. If we decide to ban it, here's the way we handle it. And then also the ban list. Here's how we come back periodically and we readdress all the previously banned cards to see if maybe the meta has moved past those cards being banned and they need to be unbanned. How do you put a banned card on notice? How do you discuss it? How do you objectively make criteria for judging whether or not it can be unbanned? And if you decide to unban it, how do you go about doing that? How do you release that information? All of these should have been things that were written down that everyone had access to, and that were followed so that you would have accountability and you would have had all of the knowledge and learning from past failures and past successes in order to guide you. And none of that happened here. And it's amazing. It's shocking to see a public-facing organization fail so spectacularly so quickly. And after so much dedicated and delicate work was done by Sheldon to try and prevent exactly this. And here we are, the rules committee folds and disbands and hands everything over to WotC at the first sign of trouble. It's amazing. So, yeah, think about how you can build robustness into your business, into your organizations you're part of. Are you in a scouting group? Do you have a church group? Do you have a whatever, a bridge club, a sports league, whatever? Think about how things happen, how decisions are made. Do you have a charter? Do you have rules by which changes come about and are deliberated and are decided on? Man, because there was apparently nothing here to guide the organization. It was just by the seat of its pants, and it absolutely crumbled apart under the first sign of pressure. Let me know what you think, guys. Thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.